There are mysteries in this world that refuse to be explained. In Michigan, ancient copper mines that predate recorded history stretch across the landscape, their origins still unknown. Strange artifacts and stone structures appear to suggest knowledge that shouldn't have existed at the time, and stories of lost cultures whisper from beneath the waters of the Great Lakes, hinting at civilizations long forgotten. Before we dive in, here's a quick note. The visuals in this video aren't necessary to enjoy the stories. You can follow along through the audio alone, making it perfect to play in the background while you work, relax, or even fall asleep to these perplexing mysteries. And if you'd like to support me in making these deep dive explorations, consider subscribing to the channel. Let's begin our journey into Michigan's strangest unsolved mysteries. Deep within the rugged forests of Michigan's Upper Peninsula, buried beneath moss and ancient pine needles, lies a mystery that has baffled archaeologists for over a century. This isn't a mystery of gold or silver, but of copper, pure, elemental copper. And the scale of what was taken from this land is almost beyond belief. Long before the Egyptians raised their pyramids to the sun, a forgotten culture was here, undertaking one of the most ambitious mining operations the ancient world has ever seen. They extracted an estimated 500 million pounds of pure copper from more than 5,000 pits and trenches scattered across the peninsula. 500 million pounds, and they did it starting over 7,000 years ago. But who were they? And how did they accomplish such a monumental feat with what we assume were simple stone tools? The evidence is etched into the landscape itself. The Saginaw Peninsula and Isle Royale are scarred with countless ancient mining pits, some reaching depths of over 30 feet. They are not random holes in the ground. They are deliberate, organized excavations, and surrounding them are literal mountains of waste rock, the debris left behind after millennia of tireless work. But the most telling artifacts are the tools left behind. They found hammerstones, massive rounded chunks of hard granite weighing anywhere from 20 to 60 pounds. These were used to pound away at the bedrock, breaking it apart to get at the pure copper veins within. They also used stone chisels and wedges, often made of harder stones, to pry the copper free. It was a process of incredible, grueling, patient labor. To extract a single large mass of copper could have taken a team of miners weeks or even months of constant, backbreaking work. The logistical challenge alone is staggering. Feeding, housing, and organizing a workforce large enough and sustained enough to move 500 million pounds of material is something we associate with empires like Rome, not with small, scattered bands of hunter-gatherers. This is where the first major mystery takes root. How did they even find the copper? The pure copper here isn't lying on the surface in obvious nuggets. It is trapped inside a hard, volcanic rock called basalt. The miners had to have an advanced understanding of geology to identify the specific fissures and lava flows where the richest copper deposits could be found. Did they simply stumble upon one vein and then develop the knowledge over centuries? Or did they possess a sophisticated, lost understanding of the earth that has since been forgotten? The precision of their work suggests they knew exactly what they were looking for. Then there's the question of what they did with all of it. 500 million pounds is an almost unimaginable amount of metal. Archaeologists have found some of it fashioned into local tools and ceremonial objects, like spear points, knives, and decorative beads. But the quantity found in North America is a tiny, tiny fraction of the total amount that was mined. So where did the rest of it go? This leads to one of the most compelling and controversial theories in American archaeology. Some researchers believe this Michigan copper was a highly sought-after commodity in a vast, ancient global trade network. Chemical analysis has shown that copper artifacts from ancient cultures across the Atlantic, including the Minoans, the Phoenicians, and even Bronze Age societies, have a unique chemical signature. This signature, a specific isotopic ratio, matches the copper found in the Great Lakes region almost perfectly. Could it be that this copper, mined by ancient hands in the Michigan wilderness, was traded across the ocean, fueling the Bronze Age revolutions in Europe and the Mediterranean? It's a theory that challenges everything we think we know about transoceanic contact, suggesting a pre-Columbian exchange of goods on a scale we are only beginning to comprehend. If true, the miners of the Upper Peninsula weren't just a local culture. They were the engine room for a forgotten chapter of global history. But without more concrete evidence, it remains one of history's most tantalizing what-ifs. The how of the mining is a marvel of persistence. The why, the ultimate destination of all that gleaming metal, is the deeper, more unsettling enigma. But the mystery of Michigan's ancient copper doesn't end with the mining itself. It deepens because the people responsible for this incredible undertaking, a culture archaeologists call the Old Copper Complex, or simply the copper culture, vanished completely. They didn't fade away slowly. They didn't evolve into a new society that we can trace. Around 3,000 years ago, the mining just stopped. The hammerstones were dropped right where they were last swung. The pits were abandoned. The sophisticated knowledge of where and how to mine, knowledge accumulated over 4,000 years, simply disappeared from the region. It's as if the entire operation was shut down overnight, leaving only the silent, gaping wounds in the earth and the stone tools behind as the only evidence they were ever there. So what happened to them? Why would a successful, highly specialized culture simply walk away from the source of its wealth and identity? One of the first clues lies in what archaeologists don't find. After 1200 BCE, the elaborate use of copper for everyday tools like spear points and knives dramatically declines in the archaeological record of the Great Lakes. It's replaced by tools made of stone and bone, technologies that are, frankly, less effective than their copper counterparts. This isn't progress, it's a regression. A society doesn't just forget how to use a superior material without a compelling reason. This suggests a sudden and catastrophic disruption. So, what kind of event could cause a people to abandon their defining craft and scatter? One leading theory points to climate and ecology. The time period around 3,000 years ago was one of significant climatic shift. Global temperatures cooled, and precipitation patterns changed. In the Great Lakes region, this could have led to shorter growing seasons, changes in forest composition, and the migration patterns of the animals these people relied on for food. If your society is spending most of its energy and manpower on the incredibly demanding task of mining copper, a sudden shift in food security would be devastating. The mining operation would have required a stable, surplus food supply to support the non-hunting, non-gathering miners. If that surplus vanished due to ecological change, the entire specialized system would have collapsed. The people would have had to disperse into smaller, more mobile groups to survive, focusing entirely on subsistence and losing their complex mining traditions within a generation. Another possibility is social upheaval, perhaps driven by conflict. The value of copper would have made the region incredibly wealthy and therefore a target. Were they invaded by another group? There is little evidence of warfare from this period, but that doesn't rule it out. Perhaps the threat was more subtle. Maybe a new people moved into the region, outcompeting the copper culture for resources and land, forcing them to flee and assimilate into other societies, their unique identity dissolving into the wider population. Their knowledge of mining may have been a secret too closely guarded, lost because they never shared it widely before they were dispersed. There is also a more unsettling speculative theory. What if the copper itself ran out? Not the metal in the ground, but the accessible metal. After 4,000 years of mining the easiest, most accessible surface veins, the miners would have been forced to dig deeper and deeper, making the process exponentially more difficult and dangerous. Perhaps they reached a technological ceiling. Their stone tools were no longer sufficient to reach the deeper deposits. They had pushed their method to its absolute limit. Faced with the prospect of a massively increased effort for a diminishing return, they may have made a collective, cultural decision to simply stop. The enterprise was no longer worth the immense cost. The knowledge, once so vital, became obsolete and was allowed to fade into legend. The most haunting question isn't just why they left, but what became of them. Did they migrate west, becoming ancestors to later Native American tribes? There are faint echoes of copperworking traditions in some Western cultures, but no direct link. Did they travel east, carrying their knowledge with them, perhaps even accompanying the very copper they mined on a journey across the ocean? Or did they simply stay in the region, abandoning their old ways so completely that their descendants had no memory of the vast mines their ancestors had dug? The silence is profound. They left behind no written records, no grand structures, only countless stone hammers resting in rubble-filled pits, waiting for an answer that may never come. Their disappearance is a stark reminder that even the most established and sophisticated cultures are fragile, and that history can sometimes erase its own chapters without a trace. Carved into a single, massive slab of sandstone deep in the Michigan wilderness, another mystery whispers from the ancient past. This is not a mystery of extracted metal, but of etched symbols. This is the site of the Sanilac Petroglyphs, the largest known collection of ancient rock art in the state. Discovered only after a massive fire swept through the area in 1881, clearing away the dense forest that had hidden them for centuries, these carvings present a puzzle that is both visual and visceral. Who made them, and what urgent message were they trying to send across the centuries? The images are clear, but their meaning is lost, a silent story waiting for a key we may never find. The carvings themselves are a fascinating and confusing gallery. There are clear, recognizable figures, hunters with bows aiming at deer, large paw prints that could be from a bear or a mythical beast, and what appears to be a great sturgeon fish. But alongside these familiar scenes are more abstract, enigmatic symbols. There are humanoid figures with strange, radiating headdresses or horns. There are intricate geometric patterns, spirals, and concentric circles that seem to map something unseen. There are even what look like giant birds with sweeping wings, creatures of power and symbolism. This mix of the everyday and the mystical is what makes the site so compelling. It suggests this was not just a record of a hunt, it was a sacred canvas, a place where the spiritual and the physical worlds met. Dating the carvings is incredibly difficult. The style and the weathering suggest they are centuries old, perhaps even 1,000 years or more, placing their creation well before European contact. They are attributed to the ancestors of the Native American tribes of the region, likely the Ojibwe or other groups from the late woodland period. But without organic material to carbon date, their exact age remains one of the many uncertainties that shroud the site. The sandstone itself is soft, and the slow, relentless process of erosion means that with every passing decade, the lines become a little fainter, the message a little harder to read. It's a race against time to understand them before they vanish completely. So what do they mean? Theories abound, but none can be proven. The most straightforward idea is that the petroglyphs are a record of events, a great hunt, a significant battle, or a celestial occurrence like a comet or an eclipse. The figures could represent a story, a history lesson painted in stone for future generations. Another, more spiritual theory is that the site was a place of powerful magic, a location where shamans would go to connect with the spirit world. The strange human figures with radiating heads could be depictions of these shamans in a trance state, their power flowing outwards. The spirals and circles might represent portals or visions seen during these rituals. Some researchers have even suggested the entire panel is a map, not of the physical landscape, but of the spiritual journey of the soul, with each symbol representing a different stage or challenge. The true meaning might be a combination of all these things. Perhaps the site served multiple purposes over many generations. One artist may have carved a successful hunt, while another, years later, added a spiritual symbol to bless the place. This layering of intention only deepens the mystery. The local Native American tribes have their own interpretations, often viewing the site as a sacred and powerful place for ceremony and vision quests. But the specific meanings of each symbol have been lost even to their oral traditions. erased by time and the devastating cultural disruption of colonization. This loss makes the Sanilac Petroglyphs profoundly sad. We are looking at a message where we can see the words but cannot understand the language. We are left with only the eerie and haunting feeling that someone long ago thought this story was important enough to carve into eternity, and we can only guess why. If the Sanilac petroglyphs represent a mystery of fading authenticity, the next enigma is one of outright disputed authenticity. It is a story that revolves around thousands of bizarre artifacts that, if real, would shatter our understanding of North American history. And if they are fake, they represent one of the most ambitious and perplexing hoaxes ever perpetrated. These are the so-called Michigan Relics, a vast collection of odd clay and slate tablets, pipes, cups, and weapons, all covered in strange inscriptions and depictions of seemingly biblical figures. Their discovery sparked a century-long battle that pitted fervent believers against skeptical scientists, a battle that remains unresolved to this day. The story begins in the 1890s with a man named James Scotford, a humble farmhand and sometime excavator from Montcalm County. While digging a post hole, Scotford claimed to have unearthed a small clay cup covered in mysterious symbols. This single find triggered a treasure-hunting frenzy. Over the next several years, Scotford and his business partner, a preacher named Daniel Soper, discovered not dozens, but thousands of these objects. They appeared to be digging them up from burial mounds and ancient sites all across the state. The relics were bizarre. The slate tablets were inscribed with what looked like a complex, unknown language, a mix of cuneiform, Egyptian hieroglyphs, and made-up characters. Even more astonishingly, many tablets depicted scenes from the Old Testament. Figures like Moses holding the tablets of the law, Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden, and even what appeared to be a Hebrew version of the story of the flood. The implication was earth-shattering. Proponents, led by Soper, argued that this was incontrovertible proof that a lost tribe of Israel, or perhaps a group of early Christian missionaries, had traveled to ancient Michigan and interacted with the native population thousands of years before Columbus. It was a theory that appealed to many at the time, offering a tangible North American connection to the biblical narratives of the Old World. For a moment, it seemed Michigan was the home of a historical discovery that would rewrite the world's history books. Almost immediately, however, red flags began to appear. Professional archaeologists from institutions like the University of Michigan and the Smithsonian examined the relics and declared them to be obvious fakes. Their reasons were numerous and damning. The objects were always found by Scotford or Soper, never by a disinterested third party. The inscriptions were carved with crisp, sharp edges, showing no signs of the weathering one would expect from objects buried for millennia. The ancient patina on the slate was easily scratched off, revealing fresh, unweathered stone beneath. The language was a nonsensical hodgepodge, borrowing from known ancient scripts but following no logical grammatical rules. Furthermore, the artistic style was completely wrong. The figures were drawn in a crude, modern, cartoonish style, unlike any authentic ancient art from any culture. The archaeological establishment universally dismissed the entire collection as a cheap fraud, a hoax designed to make money from selling forgeries to a gullible public. Yet the story refuses to die. Why? Because the scale of the hoax is itself a mystery. There are over 3,000 known relics. The effort required to create them, bury them, and then discover them all over the state would have been Herculean for Scotford and Soper. Furthermore, a small number of modern-day researchers and independent labs have occasionally produced analysis that complicates the picture. Some have claimed that residue found in the carved inscriptions shows signs of great age, or that the tools used were not modern. While these claims are heavily disputed by mainstream science, they provide just enough doubt to keep the conversation alive. So, are the Michigan relics a deliberate hoax, a genuine history, or something in between? The overwhelming scientific consensus is fraud, But the mystery that remains is one of motive and execution. Why would a farmhand and a preacher go to such incredible lengths? Was it purely for financial gain? Or was there a deeper, ideological reason to try and prove a biblical connection to America? And if it is a hoax, why has it proven so persistently captivating for over a century? The Michigan relics stand as a permanent cautionary tale about the desire to find easy answers to deep historical questions, and a strange, unresolved footnote in the history of archaeology itself. They are a mystery not about ancient times, but about our own endless fascination with rewriting them. Along the banks of the Grand River, near what is today the city of Grand Rapids, lies a silent testament to a lost genius for geometry and earth. This is the Norton Mounds group, one of the most significant surviving remnants of the Hopewell culture, a civilization that flourished 2,000 years ago. But to call them simple mounds is a profound understatement. These are not random piles of dirt. They are precise, intentional, and breathtakingly large geometric earthworks. Their builders created perfect circles, sprawling squares, and massive octagons that stretched across the landscape, all without the aid of a written language, metal tools, or even the wheel. The question that hangs over this site is not just who built them, but how did they achieve such staggering precision over such immense distances, and why did they feel compelled to do it? The scale of the ambition is the first thing that strikes you. The Hopewell people didn't just move baskets of earth, they engineered the very shape of the world around them. They built embankments that were feet high and enclosed spaces that could encompass multiple modern football fields. The Norton Group itself was part of a much larger complex of earthworks, a sacred landscape designed with purpose. But the true mystery lies in the execution. How do you plot a perfect circle hundreds of feet across using only wooden stakes and cord? How do you ensure your square has right-angled corners without a modern transit or even a simple protractor? The Hopewell builders must have possessed a sophisticated and entirely oral system of mathematics and astronomy. They were likely master surveyors, using the sun, the stars, and simple counting methods to create their vast designs with an error margin that is minuscule considering the tools at their disposal. This leads to the even bigger question. What was the purpose of these massive geometrical shapes? They were clearly not defensive structures. The walls are too low and the enclosures too open. The most widely accepted theory is that they served a ceremonial and social function. These were likely gathering places for people from across the region, a central location for rituals, feasts, trade, and the honoring of the dead. The mounds themselves often contain burials with breathtaking grave goods made of materials from all over North America: obsidian from Wyoming, copper from Lake Superior, shells from the Gulf of Mexico, and mica from the Appalachians. This suggests the Hopewell were part of a vast trade network, and the earthworks were the cultural and spiritual hub of this entire system. But there is a more celestial theory. Many Hopewell earthworks, including other famous sites like those in Newark, Ohio, are meticulously aligned with key astronomical events. Walls and gateways are positioned to mark the solstice sunrises and sunsets, or the extreme rising and setting points of the moon. The geometric shapes, therefore, might not just be art. They might be a kind of calendar or observatory, a way of mapping the heavens onto the earth. The circles could represent the cyclic nature of the seasons and the cosmos, while the squares might symbolize the earthly plane. By building these forms, the Hopewell may have been attempting to create order out of chaos, to harmonize their world with the great cycles of the universe. It was a form of architecture based on a sacred cosmology. The greatest mystery of the Norton Mounds and all Hopewell earthworks is the knowledge that was lost. This culture, with its complex understanding of geometry, astronomy, and large-scale project management, began to decline around 500 years after the Common Era began, and then vanished completely. They left behind no written records to explain their methods or their beliefs. All we have are the shapes themselves, slowly eroding under the pressure of time and modern development. When you stand before these mounds, you are not just looking at piles of dirt. You are looking at the ghost of an idea, the physical manifestation of a thought process from 2 millennia ago. We can measure their geometry with laser precision, but we can only guess at the profound meaning they held for the people who built them. The Norton Mounds are a silent, geometric language that we can see but can no longer read. We return now to the mystery of copper, but to a chapter defined by incredible danger and a stubborn, almost irrational determination. Far from the mainland, isolated in the cold, treacherous waters of Lake Superior, lies Isle Royale. This is a remote, rugged wilderness, a place of dense forest, rocky shores, and unpredictable weather. Even today, reaching it requires a long boat ride across a lake known for suddenly producing violent, deadly storms. And yet, the ancient miners we spoke of earlier did not just work the easy copper veins on the mainland. They made the deliberate, perilous decision to voyage to Isle Royale and establish mining operations there. This decision is one of the most compelling puzzles of the entire copper culture. Why would they risk everything to mine an island so remote and so dangerous? What was so special about the copper there that was worth braving the fury of Lake Superior? The journey itself was the first and greatest obstacle. The native people of this era built canoes from birch bark or hollowed-out logs. These vessels were sturdy and capable, but they were no match for the full wrath of Gitchgumi, the big sea water, as the Ojibwe called it. The lake's temperature is lethally cold year-round, and fog can descend without warning, disorienting even the most experienced navigators. A sudden squall could easily capsize a loaded canoe, sending miners and their precious cargo to a frigid grave. Simply getting to the island was a life-or-death gamble. Then, they had to establish a camp and survive for what was likely weeks or months at a time, all while performing the exhausting work of mining. This was not a casual undertaking. It was a monumental logistical effort that required planning, courage, and a powerful motivation. So what was the draw? The answer seems to lie in the quality of the copper. Isle Royale wasn't just another source of the metal. It was arguably the best source. The copper veins on the island are renowned for their purity and, crucially, their unique form. While mainland copper often exists in large, solid masses that required extensive work to break free, Isle Royale is famous for its float copper. This is copper that has been naturally separated from its bedrock by millennia of glacial activity. It can be found in smaller, more manageable nuggets and sheets, often lying partially exposed on the surface or buried in shallow soil. For an ancient miner wielding a stone hammer, this was the mother lode. The initial extraction work was already done by nature itself. The yield for their effort would have been significantly higher and possibly less physically demanding than quarrying a massive solid block from a 30-foot pit on the mainland. But was it purely a practical, economic decision? Perhaps there was more to it. Some researchers believe that the very remoteness of Isle Royale may have given the copper a spiritual or ritual significance. In many ancient cultures, items obtained through great hardship or from a distant, mythical place were considered more powerful or sacred. The perilous voyage may have been a rite of passage. The copper from the island, one at great risk from the domain of powerful lake spirits, could have been reserved for the most important objects, high-status gifts, powerful ceremonial regalia, or offerings to deities. The island itself might have been seen as a sacred ground, a place where the spirit of copper was strongest. The evidence they left behind is haunting. On Isle Royale, you won't find grand temples, only the same signature of their work. Countless hammerstones, pits, and trenches scattered through the silent woods. It paints a picture of focused, seasonal activity. They would have waited for a window of calm, whether in the late spring or summer, made the dangerous crossing, mined as much high-quality copper as they could, and then raced to get back to the mainland before the autumn storms began their relentless reign. The operation was a calculated risk on an epic scale. The existence of the Isle Royale mines tells us that the ancient copper culture was not just skilled, it was brave, organized, and strategic. They possessed advanced nautical knowledge to navigate the open lake and the logistical foresight to sustain mining camps on a remote frontier. They risked everything for a metal that was clearly more valuable than life itself. The silent, abandoned mining pits on that lonely island are a monument to human ambition, a stark reminder that the pursuit of a precious resource can drive people to conquer even the most terrifying and unforgiving places on Earth. Not all ancient mysteries are about what was left behind. Some are about what was tragically and irrevocably lost. This is the story of the Warren Mounds, a massive Hopewell burial complex that once stood near the city of Detroit. It was a site that could have been a cornerstone of our understanding of the ancient Great Lakes, a place that held untold secrets of the Hopewell people. But today, it is almost entirely gone. Not eroded by time, not buried by natural forces, but systematically dismantled and paved over by modern development in the 20th century. The mystery of the Warren Mounds is a haunting what-if. What knowledge did we obliterate before we could even begin to understand it? And what does its fate tell us about the fragile nature of the ancient past? In its prime, the complex was breathtaking. Located on a rise overlooking the Rouge River, it was one of the largest known mound groups in southeastern Michigan. Historical accounts and scattered archaeological surveys describe a grand arrangement of at least 30 to 40 earthworks. There were burial mounds, some reaching impressive heights, and vast geometric enclosures that echoed the sacred precision of the Norton Mounds far to the west. This wasn't just a cemetery, it was a ceremonial center, a place of immense spiritual and social importance for the Hopewell culture 2,000 years ago. The potential for discovery was limitless. A site of this scale likely held not just human remains, but a treasure trove of grave goods made from materials traded across the continent. Copper artifacts, intricate pottery, shell beads, and tools made of obsidian. Each object would have been a data point, a clue to the vast trade networks, social hierarchy, and spiritual beliefs of its builders. But then the modern world arrived. As the city of Detroit and its surrounding suburbs expanded explosively in the early and mid-1900s, the land became incredibly valuable. The mounds, seen by many developers and local officials merely as inconvenient piles of dirt in the way of progress, were targeted for destruction. They were bulldozed to make way for housing subdivisions, shopping centers, and roads. The process was swift and shockingly thorough. There was no major archaeological salvage effort, no last-minute rush to document what was there. The destruction of the Warren Mounds represents one of the most significant losses of cultural heritage in the state's history. It was an act of unintended but profound vandalism, erasing a library of ancient history before a single book could be properly read. The true mystery and the profound tragedy lies in the questions we can now never answer. What was the full layout of the complex? How was it astronomically aligned? What specific ceremonies took place there? The fragments of information that were saved, often by amateur archaeologists scrambling to collect what they could from the edges of the construction sites, only deepened the sense of loss. They found evidence of elaborate burials and pieces of beautiful artwork, but these are just disconnected pieces of a puzzle where the box lid, the overall picture, has been thrown away. The destruction was so complete that today, locating the exact original footprint of the complex is a challenge. A few small, preserved sections of mound exist in backyards and parks, silent, overlooked sentinels surrounded by suburbs, but the heart of the site is gone forever. The Warren Mounds stand as a ghost in the historical record. Their story is a sobering counterpoint to the preserved sites like Norton Mounds. It is a mystery of absence. It forces us to wonder how many other sites have been lost without a trace, their stories never to be told. It makes the sites that do survive all the more precious and fragile. The mystery is not what the mounds contained, but how our own hunger for land and progress blinded us to the invaluable history lying literally beneath our feet. The Warren Mounds are a permanent reminder that uncovering the past is a race against time. But sometimes, the greatest threat isn't nature's slow decay, it's our own relentless expansion. Imagine a scene that seems to defy every chapter of the history book. an archaeologist carefully excavating a Native American burial mound, a site dating back centuries, perhaps even 1,000 years, well before any European contact. The soil is brushed away from an object, revealing not a stone tool or a clay pot, but a small metallic disc. Upon closer inspection, it's a coin, and not just any coin. It's an ancient Roman coin, minted thousands of miles away and centuries before Columbus set sail. This is the core of one of Michigan's most controversial and mind-bending mysteries, the alleged discovery of a Roman coin in a burial mound near Decatur, Michigan. Is it the single most revolutionary artifact ever found in North America, or is it simply an elaborate hoax that has fooled people for over a century? The story, as it's told, begins in the early 1900s. A man named Bernard A. Peters claimed that around 1857, while he was a young boy, he witnessed the excavation of a large Native American burial mound on his family's farm. During the dig, the workers supposedly unearthed a collection of unusual artifacts, including a clay pipe, a jaw harp, and most astonishingly, a small bronze coin. The coin was later identified by experts at the Smithsonian Institution as a phallus minted during the reign of the Roman Emperor Constantine the Great, dating from between 318 and 324 AD. If this story is true, its implications are staggering. It would suggest transoceanic contact between the Old World and the New World centuries, even a millennium before the Vikings or Columbus. The immediate reaction from the archaeological community, then and now, is deep, profound skepticism. The standard historical narrative holds that there was no contact, and extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. The evidence in this case is anything but extraordinary. It is deeply problematic. The original coin has been lost for decades, so it cannot be subjected to modern analysis to verify its age or authenticity. The only account comes from Bernard Peters, who was recalling an event from his childhood many decades later. Human memory is notoriously unreliable, especially over such a long span of time. There are no official excavation records, no contemporary newspaper reports from 1857 describing the find. The entire story rests on a single, uncorroborated testimony. This leads to the most likely explanation, that the story is a classic archaeological hoax, or at best, a case of mistaken memory. How could a Roman coin end up in a Michigan field? The simplest answer is that it was dropped by a modern collector. The 19th century saw a huge boom in interest in ancient artifacts, and Roman coins were widely collected and traded. It is entirely plausible that a coin was dropped or discarded by a settler in the 1800s, and later became mixed into the soil of the mound, creating the illusion that it was buried alongside ancient Native American remains. Without a clear, documented archaeological context, a photo of it in situ in the ground, notes from a professional dig, the coin is just an outlier, an anomaly that is far more likely to be a modern intrusion than proof of ancient Romans in Michigan. And yet the story persists. It endures because it taps into our deepest fascination with the idea of lost history and forbidden archaeology. What if it was true? What if a single lost Roman vessel, blown off course, somehow made its way into the Gulf of St. Lawrence and down the Great Lakes? What if the coin was traded through incredibly long and unknown chains of indigenous trade, passing from hand to hand from the Atlantic coast all the way to Michigan? It's a thrilling thought. But without the coin itself, or any corroborating evidence from other sites, the Decatur coin remains in the realm of legend. It is a mystery that is less about the ancient world and more about ourselves, about our desire to find connections that rewrite history, and our difficulty in letting go of a story that is simply too compelling to forget, even if it almost certainly isn't true. Michigan's Saginaw Valley is, by any measure, a place of abundance. Its soil is deep and fertile, perfect for farming. Its river systems are vast and teeming with fish, providing easy transportation and a rich source of food. Its forests were once home to abundant game. For any ancient culture looking to establish a permanent home, this region should have been the perfect place. It should have been a hub of activity, a cradle of civilization in the Great Lakes, dotted with large, permanent villages that grew and thrived over centuries. But that is not what archaeologists find. Instead, they find a mystery. The Saginaw Valley shows a startling and inexplicable lack of major permanent settlements, especially during the peak periods of surrounding cultures. It's as if this fertile paradise was deliberately avoided. Why would ancient peoples shun this land of plenty? What unseen force, natural or supernatural, kept them from putting down roots in this seemingly ideal location? The evidence for this absence is found in the soil itself. While the valley is rich in isolated artifacts, projectile points, stone tools, and pottery fragments indicating that people certainly hunted and traveled through the area, it is strikingly poor in the evidence of long-term habitation. Archaeologists find very few of the large, deep-midden mounds that form from generations of people living in one place, dumping their waste, and rebuilding their homes. There is a notable lack of permanent structural remains, like post-molds from big longhouses or storage pits on a scale that would suggest a large, settled population. This is in stark contrast to regions just outside the valley, where such evidence is plentiful. It's a pattern that holds true across different cultural periods, from the archaic to the late woodland. The valley was a highway, a hunting ground, a temporary camp, but for some powerful reason, it was not a home. So what kept them away? Scientists have proposed several logical environmental theories. The most compelling is hydrology. The Saginaw Valley is essentially a vast, flat floodplain. Before modern drainage and dams, seasonal flooding was likely catastrophic and unpredictable. A village built in the spring could be completely submerged by a sudden surge of water after rains upriver. Establishing a permanent community in such an environment would be a constant, losing battle against the elements. The very rivers that provided life could also erase it in a single season. Another theory points to mosquitoes and disease. The extensive wetlands would have been a breeding ground for mosquitoes on an unimaginable scale, potentially carrying parasites and creating conditions ripe for malaria or other waterborne illnesses. The valley may have been a place of sickness, a reputation that would have warned people away from settling there for long. But what if the reason wasn't practical but spiritual? This is where the mystery deepens into the realm of the eerie. Some anthropologists suggest that the Saginaw Valley may have been considered sacred or spiritually dangerous by the native tribes of the region, such as the Anishinaabe. In many indigenous cosmologies, places of great natural power, whether for good or ill, are often treated with reverence and caution. A valley so abundant with life might also have been seen as the domain of powerful manitous, or spirits. It could have been viewed as a garden to be harvested, but not a place for the mundane activities of daily life and death. Building a permanent village with its associated burial of the dead might have been seen as a transgression, an affront to the spirits of that place. The valley might have been a neutral ground, a shared resource that different groups used but none could claim, lest it upset a delicate spiritual balance. The truth is likely a combination of all these factors. The practical dangers of flooding and disease probably forged a practical understanding that the valley was a temporary resource, not a safe homestead. This practical knowledge could then have solidified over generations into a cultural tradition or a spiritual taboo, a story told to children to keep them from tempting the dangerous waters. The Saginaw Valley settlement gap is a silent testament to a different way of seeing the world. Our modern eyes see fertile land and wonder why it wasn't used. Their ancient eyes may have seen a powerful, living entity and understood that some places are not meant to be owned, only visited with respect. The emptiness is not a void, but a message. We just haven't fully learned how to listen to it. Beneath the clear, cold waters of Grand Traverse Bay in Lake Michigan, a secret lies half buried in the silt. It's a formation that should not be there, a pattern that defies easy explanation. Discovered in 2007 by archaeologist Dr. Mark Hawley during a survey of the bay floor, This structure has ignited a fierce debate that cuts to the very heart of how we understand North American prehistory. It is a collection of large stones arranged in a seemingly deliberate pattern, one that some claim resembles the megalithic sites of Europe. Immediately, it was dubbed Michigan's Stonehenge. But is it? Is this a genuine, ancient astronomical calendar constructed by a lost civilization thousands of years ago? Or is it simply a fascinating trick of nature, a product of the last ice age? The answer remains hidden beneath the waves, a puzzle as murky as the water that conceals it. The site itself is compelling. Located about 40 feet below the surface, the main feature is a line of football-sized stones, each weighing over 1,000 pounds, which appears to form a long, straight line. But the most controversial element is what appears at the end of this line. A large, central stone with what looks like a carved image of a mastodon, an animal that went extinct in North America over 10,000 years ago. This is the detail that fuels the fire of speculation. If the carving is genuine and made by human hands, it would mean the site is unimaginably ancient, dating back to a time when humans coexisted with these giant beasts. Furthermore, some researchers who have studied the sonar images suggest the stones could be aligned with the summer solstice sunrise, much like the real Stonehenge in England. This would imply a sophisticated understanding of astronomy by a people we know nothing about. The scientific community, however, urges extreme caution. Their explanation is far less sensational but grounded in the well-documented geology of the region. Michigan is a world capital of glacial activity. The entire state was scraped, carved, and littered with stones by massive ice sheets thousands of feet thick. These glaciers deposited countless boulders in random patterns and long ridges called morelines. So-called Stonehenge formation, they argue, is a perfect example of a glacial moreline. The straight line of stones, simply the path of a retreating glacier dumping its load of debris. The large central stone with the carving, a classic case of pareidolia, the human brain's tendency to see familiar shapes, like a face or an animal, in random patterns. The lines that look like a mastodon are likely natural fissures and scratches caused by the immense pressure and grinding of the glacier against the bedrock. Geologists state that this is a common and well-understood phenomenon. This leaves us at an impasse. The site's depth provides a crucial clue to its age, but not its origin. The water level of Lake Michigan was significantly lower 10,000 years ago at the end of the last ice age. The area where these stones now lie would have been dry land. So, whether it is a man-made structure or a glacial deposit, it is ancient. The question is not when it was formed, but how. Proving the human origin is the monumental challenge. Underwater archaeology is difficult, expensive, and the visibility in the bay is often poor. The alleged mastodon carving has been criticized for its vague shape. It lacks the deep, clear, and stylistic lines of unquestionably human petroglyphs. Without an undeniable, tool-marked artifact found in direct association with the stones, the scientific consensus will always lean toward the glacial explanation. The Grand Traverse Bay Formation remains one of Michigan's most captivating underwater mysteries. It represents the eternal clash between a thrilling possibility and a sobering geological probability. It plays on our deepest desire to discover something that rewrites history, to find a connection to a forgotten world right in our own backyard. But it also serves as a lesson in scientific skepticism, reminding us that nature is the world's most prolific and creative artist, capable of producing wonders that mimic human ingenuity without any human help at all. Until a diver uncovers irrefutable proof, a tool, a datable piece of charcoal from a fire pit, or a clearly human-made symbol, the stones will keep their secret. They will remain a Rorschach test on the lake bed, a story we can see but cannot confirm, inviting us to wonder what other secrets the Great Lakes are still hiding in their depths. The past is filled with mysteries, some carved deep into the earth, some hidden beneath the waters of the Great Lakes, and others left behind in artifacts that defy explanation. The stories we've uncovered in Michigan are just a glimpse into the strange, the unexplained, and the forgotten chapters of history that continue to puzzle experts and ignite debate. But as always, the deeper we search, the more questions arise.